Good morning. You're watching All You Need to Know on Bloomberg Quint. I'm Darshan Mehta. Basically, if you're looking at what happened as far as the global markets were concerned, muted cues coming in, at least from the US markets. The Nasdaq was down in trade, while the Dow Jones and S&P did well. Strong cues coming in from Europe. Most of the European markets ended with a positive bias, but the cues from Asia are rather weak at this point of time. Most of the Asian markets are trading with a negative bias, and that is being reflected what's happened on the SGX Nifty, because the SGX Nifty is currently down by almost 45 points, below the 10,800 mark in trade. Despite the weakness, I think most of the ADRs ended with a positive bias. So you had Infosys, which was up almost 2.7%. HDFC Bank managed to rally here also, and in the US markets, Vedanta and Wipro did well. The only one that didn't do well was Dr. Reddy's, which was down 0.5%, but nevertheless, most of the ADRs gave a positive cue. Now let's look at what happened with the Nifty. The Nifty managed to rally courtesy the HDFC Twins. It was up 80 points. It managed to outperform the mid-cap and small-cap indices, which also ended with a positive bias. Now, as far as sectors are concerned, and the Nifty Bank was up almost 1%, and the Nifty PSU Bank continued its good run. Now, as far as sectors were concerned, the Nifty Pharma was up almost 1.7%. The rally continues. The FMCG index was up over 1%. What didn't do well was the Nifty Energy Index, and this was mainly led because of the weakness that we saw in Reliance Industries. Now, as far as the sectors are concerned, this month, the Nifty Pharma has managed to rally almost 14%, followed by the Energy Index. The Sensex is also up 1%. What has not done well is the high beta counters on the infra and metal name. The small cap index is also down 5%. What happened last week was, again, the banks continued to do well. The Nifty Bank was up 1.3%, led by the HDFC Twins. Nifty Pharma was up almost 0.5%. And what didn't do well last week was basically the metal index, which was down 3%, the small cap, and the PSU banking index, which was down almost 2.8%. Now, as far as companies in 52-week high, the Bajaj Twins, Finserv, as well as Finance, Page Industries, and Dr. Lal were up at a 52-week high. But the list increases for companies which have hit fresh 52-week low. You have Bank of Baroda, BEL, NBCC, Kajaria, there's PNB Housing, there's Motilal Oswal. So all these companies are trading at a fresh 52-week low. So a lot of pain is seen as far as mid-caps are concerned. FIs continued to sell, DIs continued to buy. FIs have sold in 5,000 crores, DIs have bought in double of that, 11,200 crores of net buying has happened by DIs in the market itself. The VIX is down 3.5%, given the fact that the Nifty did manage to rally, because if you're looking at, the major contributions that came in, the HDFC Twins and ITC contributed, while Reliance and TCS were the ones that didn't contribute. So Reliance was the only reason why the market probably didn't go into three-digit gains that came in on Friday. Now, as far as the futures are concerned, there was short covering that was seen on the Nifty. Open interest was down 3%, but fresh buying was seen on the Bank Nifty. Open interest built up was 6%. The Nifty Bank moved up almost 1% in trade. So there was significant amount of traction that was happening. Now, as far as the open interest build-up is concerned, put writers were active. 10,700 and 10,800 is where they were active. They shared positions on the 10,800 because the Nifty did manage to rally on the higher side. If you're looking at the total open interest, the range seems to be 10,700 to 10,000 to 11,000. That's the broad range that we're looking at currently. Now, stocks in the F&O band, the Dewan Housing, JP Associates continues to be in the F&O band. You also have CG Power and Infibeam, which were there. The new company that comes in is IDBI Bank, which managed to rally almost 2% on Friday. Now, as far as the PCR is concerned, the Nifty PCR was up 1.65 from 1.48. The Nifty Bank PCR also coming in above the 1 level in trade, given the fact that the markets is rallying. Now, stock specific. First of all, India Cement saw short covering. Open interest was down almost 6%, and the stock was up almost 4%. So short covering was seen. Ambuja saw fresh short covering that came in. So did ACC. One of the counters which is trading rather weak is SRF, which saw fresh shorts on high open interest build up of 34%. And finally, the last counter we want to speak about is the Sun Pharma, which again saw short covering. Open interest was down 4%, and the counter did manage to rally almost 4%. But now let's go across to Bloomberg's Heidi Lunn for the top international headlines.
Deutsche Bank says the trade battle between the US and the rest of the world raises the risk of slowing an otherwise vibrant American economy. Chief economist Peter Hooper says President Trump's threats of tariffs on $250 billion of Chinese goods and a levy on EU car shipments would cut 3 to 4 tenths of 1% from GDP growth this year. The EU says it's ready to retaliate to US threats of a 20% tariff on European cars. An internal EU memo rebuffs Trump's assertion that the bloc is treating the US unfairly. It also warns that disputes between Washington and its partners are set to escalate in the coming months, with strength replacing rules as the basis for trade relations and negotiations. Well, meanwhile, EU officials are in China for high-level trade talks. Saudi Arabia and Russia got what they wanted out of the OPEC meeting with a deal to increase production. The Saudi energy minister promised to act decisively to keep oil prices under control. That signals a real supply boost approaching 1 million barrels a day. However, Iran says it doesn't believe buyers of its oil will get waivers from the US under the sanctions reimposed by President Trump.
I believe that President Trump is doing against the market fundamentals, against the market, against the free market, and it's not on benefit of the even consumers at the high level price caused by the action of President Trump.
Malaysia's Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad says fair value for the ringgit is 3.8 to the dollar. That's the same as the peg his previous government imposed back in 1998 during the Asian financial crisis. It hasn't traded at that level since mid-2015, but Mahathir told Bloomberg the current exchange rate reflects the state of the world economy, not Malaysia's.
We would like to strengthen our ringgit, but it should be done naturally.
What is the fair value of the ringgit?
I think 380 would be good.
Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Heidi Lun. This is Bloomberg.
It's been a kind of a slow, steady grind up of late, and that big move that we saw on Friday, as you say, it was a smaller than expected increase, but it's still enough to trigger an almost 5% move in crude, which is huge on a single day. Whether or not we're testing that kind of $70 level at the moment and in future months, I think largely relies on whether we get a bit more of a spread increase. As this chart shows, you know, the difference now between WTI and you know, Texas crude, it's very crucial at this point whether you get a little bit of a blowout there. Whether it's a bullish sign or not, I mean, it comes back to the more broader picture about what the oil price means for global inflation at this point in the cycle. Inflationary pressures starting to kind of show in many economies, but a lot of people still struggling with inflation not as strong as they might like, and central bankers continuing to talk to that theme. So if oil prices do continue to tick into the 70s and higher and sustain there, then clearly for inflation fundamentals, that's surely a good thing.
There will be indirectly a reallocation of cuts, and I think the JMMC's focus, rather than on adherence to certain specific numbers per country, is going to be to stay within the 100%, not to overshoot in a way that will hurt the market by oversupplying crude oil, but at the same time not to be overly strict and putting a pro rata cap on each country that doesn't allow us to get close to the 1 million. So the exact allocation on a country by country for those who can will be the job of the JMMC to discuss. Some of it will depend on available capacity, which we need to have an honest discussion about who can do what. But we, as Saudi Arabia, obviously can deliver as much as the market would need, but we're going to be respectful of the 1 million barrel cap, and at the same time be respectful of allocating some of that to countries that can deliver it, and that will take place in the next few days and weeks as we open that dialogue and allow the GMMC to do that allocation.
Back to Indian equity markets. Stock of the day, Zee Media Corp. Well, the promoter entity has offloaded 1.06% stake in the company for a sum around 15 odd crore. You have Arm Infra and Utility, which have sold off 50 lakh shares of the company at a price of 29.5 per share, which is almost a 3 to 4% premium as compared to the current market price. The entity held around 34% of its stake as per the March shareholding pattern. And if you look at the buying side, we have JSGG Infra Developers, which acquired similar percent stake, that is 1.6% stake at a price of around 29.5. Well, if you look at the shareholding pattern, shareholding promoter entity stands at 69.1%, while the public shareholding stands at 31% as per the March shareholding pattern. And if you look at the financial picture, we're looking at a 28% kind of a growth on top line. EBITDA has seen 18%, stood at 18% as compared to 22%. And if you look at the profitability figure, the company has actually reported a profit of around 19%, 19.7 odd crore as compared to the loss that it reported in FY17 on consolidated basis. Discontinuation of a loss-making operational business mainly led to a bump up on the profitability front for the company.
Well, we are back with the commodities and currency segment, starting off with commodities and oil prices. Those were actually in focus on Friday and today as well. Brent currently is down about 2%, but on Friday's session, WTI managed to surge the most since late 2016 and ended the day about 4.6% higher. Now, this was on the back of lower than expected production increase that we got from the OPEC at the Vienna meet. So, in fact, OPEC approved a 1 million barrel increase in the output production for oil prices. However, there are some OPEC members which believe that the actual increase could be in the range of about 700,000 barrels a day. That is because of some of the countries are unable to produce or pump in that much oil. Now, as far as brokerages are concerned, we have one note from JP Morgan in which they say that the new production is likely to hit the market as early as fourth quarter of this calendar year. But if you look at the base metal space, the index itself snapped its 6-day losing streak and ended positive on the London Metal Exchange. As far as individual base metals are concerned, zinc posted its biggest loss since weekly loss since December 2016, and we had nickel and lead which gained more than 1.5% each. On the other hand, we had aluminium, zinc, tin, and which ended lower in trade on Friday. Now, if you look at the Shanghai Futures Exchange, the base metals are in fact trading with a mixed bias, where copper is up about 0.6%, and we have Shanghai Steel that has lost more than 1% in trade. Lastly, we have gold prices which are inching upwards. This is the second straight day that we are seeing some bit of green for gold prices. But with that, let's welcome back Saloni Dhanuka for the currency space update.
Thanks for that, Jay. So speaking about Indian rupee, after 2 straight weeks of losses, the rupee on Friday ended with modest gains against the dollar. Now the home currency rose past the crucial $68 mark and ended 17 paise higher at 67.84 levels against the dollar. Now remember, the home currency depreciated last week to its 1-month low of 68.39 levels after US Central Bank Fed Chair reiterated their commitment to more rate hikes in this year. Well, meanwhile, countries' foreign exchange reserves last week dropped nearly $3 billion to $410 billion mark for the week ended 15th June. Well, speaking of the bond market, sovereign bonds capped their biggest weekly gain in nearly 2 months after central bank showed that policy makers were more dovish than they were expected to be, and hence we have seen the 10-year benchmark yield dropping nearly 7 basis points last week to end at 7.82%. Well, speaking of the global front, US President Donald Trump continued escalating their trade war fears, and hence we have seen dollar index easing from its 11-month high, and it is now trading flat near 94.50 levels. Elsewhere, euro gained against the dollar, and it is trading nearly at its 11-month high after Eurozone creditors worked for their debt restructuring program with Greece, and also some positive macro data added to their positive sentiments. And lastly, speaking of dollar rupee, now it is trading at 68.22 levels against the dollar, which is 40 paise weaker than Friday's closing price, which is indicating a weak opening for Indian rupee in today's trade.
Well, amongst the stocks to track and trade today is Biocon, where it has received the US FDA clearance, the establishment inspection report for the sterile drug manufacturing facility in Bangalore. So watch out for that name. Another stock to keep an eye out for will be Dish TV, which has offered a public sale of 50 crore shares at the price of 74 each. This is the open offer for 26% on the back of that Videocon D2H merger. So Dish TV is another stock to watch out for. We're also tracking Symphony. They've made relatively big acquisition. They've bought 95% stake in an Australian cooling appliances company for 220 crores. They've said that this is to diversify or reduce the dependence on seasonality in India. So Symphony is another stock to watch. Phoenix Mills, the company's arm, has acquired retail development in Indore for 234 crores. They've said that this will add to about 1.1 million square feet of retail space. So Phoenix Mills is another one that we are tracking. IDBI Bank, of course, will continue to remain in focus after closing 2% higher on Friday. Now, this is on the back of sources saying that the government is looking to sell about 40% stake in IDBI Bank to LIC. In fact, what we've gathered is that they're looking for an exemption on the cap of 15% equity shareholding by LIC. So, IRDA is set to consider the issue on 29th of June, but this will continue to remain in focus, so we will continue to track that. Also, PNB Housing Finance, there have been significant news developments on this front. You have today's ET report, which says that it's HDFC and Kotak Mahindra Bank which are eyeing PNB Housing Finance. In fact, Carlyle and PNB both are set to have put their 33% each stake on the block. So totally they're looking to sell that 66% to a large investor, and the deal is likely to fetch close to 6,000 crore for each of the entities. So PNB Housing Finance also will continue to remain in focus.
Well, in the 37th annual journal meeting of Infosys, the mood was largely optimistic amongst the shareholders, and they were really confident regarding the growth of the company going forward. And Nandan Nilekani was attending his first AGM nearly after 8 years, after he took down as the charge of non-executive chairman at Infosys last year. Now, this is also Salil Parikh's first AGM after he took over the charge as the CEO of Infosys earlier in January this year. Now, some of the key highlight of this year's AGM is that the Infosys board and management were really focused on getting this message across that the board is stable and united, and the complete focus is on the growth of the company. Nandan Nilekani in his address mentioned that the priority is to get the strategy right under the leadership of Salil Parikh, and Salil Parikh in his address mentioned that they have developed a 5-pronged strategy within the digital space to drive growth, and for that they have set a 3-year roadmap to achieve those objectives. Now, as far as the shareholders are concerned, they were largely optimistic of the fact that Nandan is at the helm of everything, and they were not really worried about the corporate governance issue that really plagued the company last year. But some of the key issues that really highlighted the raise during this year's annual journal meeting were that the first is the sudden entry and exit of the top level executives. Shareholders are of the view that this should be handled carefully. Now, the other issue was that the shareholders highlighted was the issue of declining revenue of the company. But one of the issues that really stood apart at this year's AGM is that they was really concerned about the corporate governance issues regarding the acquisition strategy of Infosys, referring to the acquisition of Panaya, which didn't really go well in the favor of Infosys. Most of the shareholders were really concerned about the acquisition strategy of the company. Now, Infosys took note of the concerns of the shareholders, and they said that they follow all due diligence for acquisitions going ahead, and they are monitoring all the acquisitions really very carefully.
Let's also get your check on the top 3 stocks to watch based on yesterday's delivery buying and selling. The first stock on the list is big boy Reliance Industries. Now, that was down about 2% in trade on Friday and saw delivery selling in excess of 1,400 crores. Both the delivery volume and the total volume managed to more than double for itself. And the second stock that we have is SRF. That was down about 6.5% on Friday and saw delivery selling of nearly 78 crores. The delivery volume volume surged more than 3 times, as did the total volume, up about 228%. Last and final stock we have, that is United Spirits. Now that was up about 4.2% in trade and saw delivery buying of nearly 75 crores. The delivery volume surged 76%, while the total volume managed to more than double for itself.
Well, all the latest news and market action right here on Bloomberg Quint Live. There are also several stories on the website currently that you can check out, starting with just a couple right here. China's central bank will cut the amount of cash some lenders must hold as reserves, unlocking about $108 billion of liquidity as it seeks to control leverage and support smaller companies. And the merger of Idea Cellular and Vodafone India may not be completed by the June 30th deadline, as the telecom department is looking to raise a fresh demand of around 4,700 crore rupees from Vodafone India before the merger can take place, and that's a PTI report. All right, that's all you need to know going into trade today. Up next on Bloomberg Quint is Indian Open, so do stay tuned.